What if your next decision decided your future? Right now, every choice you make does exactly that. Whether it's launching a new project, hiring the next superstar, or pivoting your strategy, every decision you face is a crossroads. One path leads to mastery, accelerating your career, multiplying your income, and earning the quiet confidence reserved for the elite. The other path? It traps you in hesitation, regret, and endless loops of second-guessing. Look around. The world's best, the leaders, founders, and visionaries you admire, aren't smarter or luckier. They aren't immune to doubt or fear. No, they simply understand one powerful truth. Decision-making isn't a talent, it's a skill you can master. Smart Decisions Fast isn't just another book about thinking clearly. It's your new operating manual for action. It's your training ground for precision, speed, and confidence. It's your armor against indecision, procrastination, and cognitive sabotage. This is not a gentle stroll. It's an urgent call to action. Your time, your goals, your future deserve clarity, not confusion. Ask yourself, are you tired of drowning in data, but starving for clarity? Are you fed up watching peers leapfrog ahead while you stall out on choices? Are you done feeling overwhelmed, unsure, and endlessly exhausted by your own thoughts? If the answer is yes, you're ready to discover a proven blueprint, tested by those who faced your exact challenges and conquered them. By the time you finish this book, you'll wield a repeatable, bias-proof system. You'll know exactly when to trust your gut, exactly when to pause and probe, exactly how to shift gears, instantly, effortlessly, powerfully. Here's the truth. The clock is ticking. You don't have forever to figure this out. Decision mastery isn't optional. It's essential. Your career depends on it. Your income depends on it. Your sanity depends on it. So make your first smart decision right now. Keep reading, keep learning, keep winning. This is your moment to finally get ahead. Faster, smarter, decisively. Your next level starts here. Chapter 1: Dual Systems. Your brain is at war with itself every second of every day. Two opposing forces battle for control of your decisions. One fires instantly, lightning fast, automatic, ruthless. The other deliberates, slow, methodical, energy hungry. Most people never learn to command both. They let whichever system screams loudest make the call. That's why they stay stuck while others surge ahead. The winners? They've mastered the art of switching gears before their own bias notices. Welcome to dual process theory, the cognitive battlefield where your success gets decided. System 1 is your first strike sniper, pattern matching, emotion tagging, meaning making in milliseconds. System 2 is your artillery, logical, analytical, resource intensive. Both are weapons. Both can save you. Both can destroy you. The difference between elite decision makers and everyone else isn't intelligence. It's knowing which system to deploy when. System 1 operates like a reflex. It compresses reality into snap judgments faster than you can blink. When you walk into a room and instantly feel something's wrong, that's System 1 scanning for threats. When you meet someone and immediately trust them, that's System 1 pattern matching their face against your mental database of safe people. This system evolved to keep you alive. Hesitate when a predator charges, and you're dead. But in the modern world, that same hair-trigger response can torpedo your career. You see a proposal that feels wrong and reject it instantly, missing the opportunity of a lifetime. You trust someone because they remind you of your favorite uncle, and they steal your company blind. System 1 trades precision for speed. It's brilliant at recognizing patterns, but terrible at logic puzzles. Show most people this question. A bat and ball cost $1.10 total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Roughly 50% will blurt out 10 cents. Wrong. The answer is 5 cents. System 1 grabbed the obvious numbers and ran. That's the trap. System 1 feels so confident, so immediate, so right. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights saying, intuitive guess in progress. It just delivers what feels like truth. System 2 is your cognitive override. It's the voice that says, wait, let me think about this. It's deliberate, logical, exhausting. When you force yourself to double-check that math problem, that's System 2 taking control. When you resist the urge to fire off an angry email and instead draft 3 versions, that's System 2 protecting you from System 1's impulses. But System 2 has a price. It burns glucose like a furnace. It demands attention. It slows you down. Use it too much, and you'll hit decision fatigue, that mental exhaustion where every choice feels impossible. Use it too little, and you'll make fast, terrible decisions all day long. The elite understand this trade-off. They don't try to think deeply about everything. That's a recipe for paralysis. Instead, they've trained themselves to recognize when the stakes demand System 2's precision. Here's your gear shift protocol. When you feel absolute certainty about a high-stakes decision, that's your red flag. Certainty is System 1's signature. It doesn't do doubt. It doesn't do maybe. It delivers conviction wrapped in emotion. The moment you catch yourself thinking, this is obviously the right choice, stop. Take 3 deep breaths. Ask yourself, could I be wrong? What would I need to believe for the opposite to be true? That's your System 2 activation sequence. Install friction in your biggest decisions. Before you hire someone, mandate a 24-hour waiting period. Before you kill a project, require 3 independent opinions. Before you pivot your strategy, demand written pros and cons. These aren't bureaucratic obstacles, they're cognitive circuit breakers that force System 2 online when it matters most. Train both systems like an athlete trains muscle groups. For System 1, build pattern libraries. After every major decision, document what cues you noticed and whether your gut was right. Over time, you'll upgrade your intuitive database. Your snap judgments will get sharper, faster, more accurate. For System 2, practice cognitive reflection daily. Solve logic puzzles. Question your assumptions. Play devil's advocate with your own ideas. The more you exercise deliberate thinking, the less energy it consumes. The best decision makers aren't the ones who think about everything or the ones who trust their gut blindly. They're the ones who know which tool fits which job. They let System 1 handle pattern recognition and emotional intelligence. They deploy System 2 for complex analysis and bias detection. They've turned the war between their systems into a coordinated assault on uncertainty. You have the same hardware they do. You have the same 2 systems battling for control. The only question is whether you'll learn to command them or let them command you. Master this, and you'll make decisions faster and better than 99% of people around you. Ignore it, and you'll stay trapped in the endless loop of second-guessing and regret that paralyzes the masses. But raw speed and accuracy are just the beginning. Even the sharpest dual-system mastery can't save you if you're solving the wrong problems. That's where pattern power becomes your next force multiplier. The ability to convert experience into instant recognition, letting you spot the right battles before others even know there's a war. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Pattern Power. There's a secret weapon hiding in your past experiences. Every meeting you've survived, every project you've launched, every crisis you've navigated, they're all sitting in your brain like dormant ammunition. Most people treat these experiences like old files gathering dust. The elite, they've learned to weaponize them into instant decision-making power. What if you could scan any situation and know exactly what to do in under 30 seconds? What if complexity didn't slow you down, but actually made you faster? What if your experience became a precision instrument instead of a vague feeling? That's the promise of pattern power, the ability to convert your reps into recognition, your history into velocity. But here's what nobody tells you. This isn't about having more experience. It's about encoding the right experiences in the right way. It's about building what cognitive scientists call situational fingerprints, unique combinations of cues that trigger instant understanding. Think about the last time you walked into a meeting and immediately knew it was going to be a disaster. You couldn't explain why. The agenda looked normal. The attendees seemed reasonable, but something felt off. That wasn't mystical intuition. That was pattern recognition firing at light speed. Your brain had detected a constellation of microsignals. The way people avoided eye contact, the forced casualness in someone's voice, the defensive body language around the table. Individually, these cues meant nothing. Together, they matched a pattern you'd seen before. Your subconscious screamed, "Danger," before your conscious mind even noticed the details. This is how experts operate in every field. Fire commanders don't analyze 17 different evacuation strategies when a building's about to collapse. They scan the scene, match it to a familiar pattern, and execute the first workable solution. While rookies are still gathering data, veterans are already moving. The difference isn't experience alone, it's how that experience gets stored and retrieved. Most people experience something, learn a vague lesson, and move on. They treat each situation like it's completely unique. They start from scratch every time. That's why they're slow. That's why they're inconsistent. That's why they get overwhelmed when stakes rise and complexity multiplies. Pattern masters do something different. They deliberately extract the underlying structure from each experience. They identify which cues actually mattered and which were just noise. They build mental libraries of if this, then that sequences that can be triggered instantly when similar situations arise. But here's the trap most people fall into. They try to memorize everything. They treat their brain like a hard drive, cramming in every detail from every experience. That's not pattern recognition. That's information hoarding. It slows you down and clutters your thinking. Real pattern power comes from ruthless editing. You need to identify the vital few cues that actually predict outcomes and ignore everything else. When you walk into that meeting, you don't need to notice the color of the walls or what everyone's wearing. You need to detect the 3 or 4 signals that actually matter. Who's talking to whom before the meeting starts? How quickly people respond to questions, whether the decision maker is engaged or checking their phone. This is what separates amateurs from professionals. Amateurs see complexity and get overwhelmed. Professionals see complexity and immediately filter it down to the essential patterns they recognize. The key is building what researchers call the first workable mindset. You're not looking for the perfect solution, you're looking for the first solution that will work. When experts scan a situation, they're not generating a comprehensive list of options. They're running a quick mental simulation. If I do X, what happens? Does it work? Good enough, execute. This mental simulation happens in seconds, not minutes. It's not a detailed analysis, it's a rapid test of feasibility. Will this approach solve the core problem? Are there any obvious failure modes? Can I course correct if needed? If the answers are yes, yes, and yes, they move. But pattern recognition has a dark side. The same speed that makes you effective can make you blind. When you've seen something before, your brain wants to apply the same solution automatically. Sometimes that's brilliant. Sometimes it's catastrophic. The masters have learned to recognize when their first pattern match might be wrong. They've developed internal tripwires, moments when they force themselves to pause and double-check their recognition. High stakes, unfamiliar context, emotional pressure. These are the conditions where even expert pattern recognition can fail. That's why the most dangerous phrase in any organization is, "This is just like that time when." It signals pattern recognition in action, but it also signals potential blindness to what's actually different this time. The solution isn't to abandon pattern recognition, it's to calibrate it. After every major decision, ask yourself, what pattern did I match this to? Was I right? What cues did I miss? What would I notice differently next time? This feedback loop is what transforms good pattern recognition into great pattern recognition. Your experiences are already there, waiting to be weaponized. The question is whether you'll let them sit dormant or forge them into a decision-making edge that compounds with every choice you make. Master this, and you'll move through complexity like water through a sieve, fast, clean, unstoppable. But even the sharpest pattern recognition means nothing if you can't execute at the speed of opportunity. That's where the next force multiplier becomes critical, a military framework that turns recognition into action faster than your competition can even process what's happening. Chapter 3, OODA Sprint. Speed kills in the decision game. Not reckless speed, strategic speed, the kind that lets you see, process, choose, and execute while your competition is still figuring out what's happening. There's a framework born in the cockpit of fighter jets that can give you this edge. It's been battle-tested at 30,000 feet, where a slow decision means death. But here's what most people don't understand. This isn't about moving faster. It's about moving through decisions faster. It's about compressing the entire decision cycle into a weapon that disorients everyone around you. Welcome to the OODA Sprint, where temporal monopoly becomes your unfair advantage. The letters stand for something, but the real power isn't in what they represent. It's in how they connect. It's in the loop itself, the relentless cycle that turns information into action faster than anyone expects. Master this, and you'll operate in a different time zone than your competitors. Most people make decisions like they're building a cathedral, slowly, carefully, with endless deliberation. They gather data for weeks, they schedule meetings to discuss the meetings, they create committees to evaluate the committees. By the time they're ready to act, the opportunity has moved on. The OODA masters make decisions like they're in aerial combat, rapidly, decisively, with just enough information to win. They understand that in a fast-moving world, the biggest risk isn't making the wrong decision. It's making the right decision too late. But speed without structure is chaos. That's where the loop becomes your salvation. It's a 4-stage cycle that ensures you're not just moving fast, you're moving smart. The first stage is about intake, rapid environmental scanning that captures what matters and filters out what doesn't. This isn't about collecting every piece of data in sight. It's about developing the ability to spot threats and opportunities before they fully materialize. It's about training your attention to focus on the signals that actually predict change. Most people observe like tourists, passively taking in whatever catches their eye. OODA practitioners observe like predators, actively hunting for the information that gives them an edge. They know what to look for because they've trained themselves to recognize the early warning signs of both danger and opportunity. The second stage is where most people get stuck. They've gathered information, but they can't make sense of it. They have data, but no understanding. They see the trees, but miss the forest. This is where mental model fusion becomes critical, the ability to take what you've observed and rapidly integrate it with everything you already know. This isn't analysis paralysis, it's synthesis acceleration. You're not trying to understand everything perfectly, you're trying to understand enough to act effectively. You're cross-referencing what you're seeing against patterns you recognize, frameworks you trust, and principles that have served you before. But here's the trap. Your existing mental models can blind you to new realities. That's why this stage includes bias purge checkpoints, moments where you deliberately question your assumptions and test your interpretations. You ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What am I not seeing? What would someone from a completely different background notice that I'm missing? The third stage is where courage meets clarity. You've observed the situation and oriented your understanding. Now you have to choose. This is where most people freeze. They want more information. They want more time. They want more certainty. OODA practitioners understand that certainty is a luxury they can't afford. They operate on the 70% rule. When you have 70% of the information you think you need, it's time to decide. Waiting for 100% certainty means someone else will act while you're still gathering data. This stage has its own discipline. You don't make decisions by committee or consensus. You make them through a 2-question clarity drill that cuts through complexity. What's the real problem we're solving? What's the simplest action that moves us forward? Answer those 2 questions, and you're ready to move. The fourth stage is where decisions become reality. This isn't about perfect execution. It's about immediate execution with built-in feedback loops. You act, you measure, you adjust. You don't wait for perfect conditions or perfect plans. You create momentum and course correct as you go. But here's what makes this truly powerful. The loop never stops. The moment you act, you're already observing the results. You're already orienting to the new reality your action created. You're already deciding on the next move. The cycle compresses and accelerates until you're operating at a tempo that leaves others dizzy. Companies that have mastered this compression report seizing 33% more market share in volatile conditions. They're not smarter than their competitors. They're faster. They see opportunities and threats sooner. They decide and act while others are still scheduling meetings. The secret isn't in any single stage of the loop. It's in the transitions between stages. It's in how quickly you can move from observation to orientation to decision to action and back to observation again. It's in building a decision-making metabolism that operates at the speed of change itself. Most people think speed means cutting corners. OODA practitioners know speed means eliminating waste. They don't skip steps, they streamline them. They don't ignore information, they prioritize it ruthlessly. They don't avoid decisions, they make them with disciplined urgency. Master this loop, and you'll develop what fighter pilots call temporal superiority, the ability to operate inside your opponent's decision cycle. While they're still figuring out what's happening, you've already acted 3 times. But even the fastest decision loop can lead you astray if you're optimizing for the wrong outcomes. That's where the next breakthrough becomes essential. A deceptively simple framework that cuts through complexity with surgical precision, making the right choice obvious even when everything else is chaos. Chapter 4: Frugal Trees. Less is lethal. While everyone else drowns in data, building complex models with dozens of variables and sophisticated algorithms, there's a counterintuitive approach that cuts through complexity like a blade through silk. It's so simple, it seems almost primitive, so elegant, it feels like cheating. What if the secret to better decisions wasn't more information, but fewer variables? What if 3 carefully chosen cues could outperform a 100-factor analysis? What if the path to precision ran through radical simplicity? This isn't about dumbing down your decisions, it's about weaponizing focus. The world wants you to believe that complex problems require complex solutions. That's a lie sold by consultants and software vendors who profit from your confusion. The truth is more brutal and more beautiful. Most decisions hinge on just a few critical factors. Everything else is noise. The masters of rapid decision-making have discovered something that sounds impossible. You can often achieve 95% accuracy with just 3 well-chosen cues. Not 30, not 13, 3. And you can do it in half the time it takes traditional methods to deliver inferior results. But here's what separates this approach from oversimplification. The cues aren't random. They're not the first 3 things that come to mind. They're the 3 factors that actually predict success, identified through rigorous testing and ruthless elimination. Think of it as decision archaeology. You're digging through all the possible factors that could influence an outcome, but instead of keeping everything you find, you're searching for the few artifacts that tell the whole story. The rest gets discarded, no matter how interesting or seemingly important. This runs against every instinct you've been trained to follow. In school, you got rewarded for showing your work, for considering multiple perspectives, for demonstrating comprehensive analysis. In the real world, you get rewarded for being right, fast, and first. Comprehensive analysis is often the enemy of all 3. The structure itself is deceptively simple. You start with a clear definition of success, what outcome you're trying to achieve. Then you identify the single most predictive factor for that outcome. If that factor points toward success, you might be done. If it points toward failure, you stop. If it's unclear, you move to the second factor, then the third. But the real power isn't in the structure, it's in the selection. How do you identify which 3 factors actually matter? How do you resist the temptation to include just one more variable that seems important? How do you build confidence that you're not missing something critical? This is where most people fail. They either choose factors based on intuition alone or they get paralyzed trying to analyze every possible variable to find the perfect three. Both approaches miss the point. The selection process requires a different kind of thinking. You need to become ruthless about correlation versus causation. You need to distinguish between factors that seem important and factors that actually predict outcomes. You need to test your assumptions against historical data, not just current beliefs. Start by examining past decisions in similar situations. What factors were present when things went well? What was different when they went poorly? Look for patterns that repeat across multiple scenarios. The factors that consistently correlate with success are your candidates. Everything else, no matter how logical or appealing, gets eliminated. But correlation isn't enough. You need factors that not only predict success, but do so early enough to be actionable. A factor that perfectly predicts failure, but only becomes apparent after it's too late to change course, is useless for decision-making. You need leading indicators, not lagging confirmations. The pruning process is where discipline meets payoff. Every additional factor you consider slows down your decision-making and increases the chance of analysis paralysis. The goal isn't to capture every nuance, it's to capture enough signal to make consistently good decisions faster than anyone else. This means killing your darlings. That factor you're convinced is crucial. If it doesn't improve predictive accuracy in testing, it goes. That variable everyone in your industry considers, if it's not in your top 3 predictors, it's noise. This isn't about being right in theory, it's about being effective in practice. The testing phase separates amateurs from professionals. You can't just build your tree and hope it works. You need to backtest it against historical decisions. You need to run live experiments. You need to measure not just accuracy, but speed. A decision framework that's 98% accurate but takes 3 times as long might be inferior to one that's 95% accurate and delivers results immediately. The real magic happens when you embed these trees into your daily workflow. Instead of treating them as occasional tools, you make them automatic. You create decision tree cheat cards for common scenarios. You build prompts into your systems that trigger the right questions at the right moments. But here's where it gets interesting. The trees themselves evolve. As you gather more data and face new situations, you refine your factor selection. You discover that what predicted success in stable markets might be different from what predicts success in volatile ones. You learn that factors that matter for small decisions might be irrelevant for large ones. The goal isn't to create the perfect tree, it's to create a learning system that gets better with each decision. You're not just making choices faster, you're building decision-making intelligence that compounds over time. Master this approach, and you'll develop an almost supernatural ability to cut through complexity and identify what really matters. While others debate dozens of variables, you'll focus on the vital few. While they analyze, you'll decide. While they hesitate, you'll act. But even the most elegant decision framework can lead you astray if your thinking is corrupted by invisible forces that twist every choice before you even realize they're at work. That's where the next critical defense becomes essential. Armor against the cognitive saboteurs that turn smart people into their own worst enemies. Chapter 5, Bias Armor. Your brain is sabotaging you. Right now, as you read this, invisible forces are warping your judgment, skewing your perceptions, and rigging every decision you think you're making rationally. You can't see them. You can't feel them. But they're there, working like cognitive malware that corrupts your thinking before you even realize it's happening. The scariest part? The smarter you are, the more vulnerable you become. Intelligence doesn't protect you from these mental hijackers. It just makes you better at rationalizing the bad decisions they trick you into making. That's why brilliant executives make catastrophic choices, why genius investors lose fortunes, why strategic masterminds get blindsided by obvious threats. But there's a way to fight back, a form of cognitive Kevlar that can deflect these invisible attacks and restore clarity to your decision-making. The question is, are you ready to admit you need protection? Most people believe they're rational decision makers. They think bias is something that happens to other people, the emotional ones, the impulsive ones, the ones who don't think things through. This belief itself is a trap. It's the overconfidence that makes you most vulnerable to the very forces you're convinced don't affect you. The truth is more humbling. Every human brain comes preloaded with systematic errors in thinking. These aren't character flaws or intelligence deficits. They're features, not bugs. Mental shortcuts that helped our ancestors survive, but now sabotage our success in the modern world. Consider the anchoring ambush. The first number you hear in any negotiation becomes a gravitational force that pulls all subsequent numbers toward it. Show someone a random number before asking them to estimate something completely unrelated, and their answer will drift toward that random anchor. This happens even when people know about anchoring, even when they're warned it's happening, even when they're experts in the field. Or take the availability trap. Your brain judges probability by how easily you can recall examples. If plane crashes get more media coverage than car accidents, you'll overestimate the danger of flying and underestimate the danger of driving. If your last 3 hires worked out well, you'll be overconfident about your next hiring decision. If recent market volatility is fresh in your memory, you'll make overly conservative investment choices. Then there's the overconfidence mine, perhaps the most dangerous of all. The better you get at something, the more likely you are to overestimate your abilities in that area. Success breeds overconfidence, which breeds carelessness, which breeds failure. It's a cycle that has destroyed more careers than incompetence ever could. These aren't isolated incidents. They're systematic distortions that affect every decision you make. And they're just the beginning. There are dozens more, each with its own way of corrupting your judgment, each invisible until you know what to look for. But awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing about bias doesn't make you immune to it any more than knowing about viruses makes you immune to infection. You need active protection, decision hygiene protocols that create barriers between your biases and your choices. The first line of defense is independence. When facing important decisions, force yourself to form initial judgments in isolation before consulting others or gathering additional information. Write down your assessment before you hear anyone else's opinion. This prevents your thinking from being contaminated by anchors, groupthink, or social pressure. The second defense is aggregation. Instead of relying on a single perspective, even your own, collect multiple independent judgments and combine them systematically. This doesn't mean decision by committee. It means gathering diverse viewpoints, weighting them appropriately, and using mathematical rules rather than political ones to reach conclusions. The third defense is what researchers call noise audits. Take identical decisions made by different people in your organization and measure the variance in outcomes. You'll be shocked by what you find. Studies of Fortune 500 companies reveal 40 to 60% variance in judgment on identical cases. That's not bias, that's pure noise, random variation that has nothing to do with the facts of the situation. But the most powerful defense is the premortem, a rapid mental exercise that inoculates you against overconfidence and availability bias simultaneously. Before making any significant decision, spend 60 seconds imagining that your choice has failed spectacularly. What went wrong? What did you miss? What assumptions proved false? This isn't pessimism, it's immunization against the blind spots that destroy even brilliant strategies. There's also the reversal test, a simple but devastating question that exposes hidden biases. If the opposite were true, what would I need to believe? If you're convinced a candidate is perfect for the job, ask what you'd need to believe for them to be a terrible fit. If you're certain a market opportunity is golden, explore what would make it a disaster. This forces your brain to consider evidence it naturally wants to ignore. The key is making these defenses automatic. You can't rely on remembering to use them when stakes are high and pressure is intense. You need to embed them into your decision-making process as standard operating procedures. Create checklists. Build prompts into your systems. Make bias checking as routine as spell checking. But here's the paradox. The more you protect yourself from bias, the more you realize how much noise was corrupting your decisions all along. You start to see that what you thought was signal was often just static. What you believed was insight was often just illusion. This revelation leads to a deeper question. If so much of what we think we know is contaminated by bias and noise, how do we separate the genuine signals from the cognitive static? How do we tune our attention to capture only the information that actually matters while filtering out everything that just feels important? Chapter 6. Clean Signals. You're drowning in information, but starving for insight. Every ping, every notification, every dashboard update feels urgent. Every metric seems important. Every data point demands attention. But here's the brutal truth. 95% of the information flooding your consciousness is cognitive junk food, empty calories that fill your mental bandwidth without nourishing your decision-making. The winners in this attention economy aren't the ones who process the most information. They're the ones who process the right information. They've learned to slice through the noise like a laser through fog, extracting pure signal while everything else fades to irrelevance. What if clarity wasn't about seeing more, but about seeing less? What if the path to better decisions ran through radical information elimination? What if your competitive edge lay not in what you knew, but in what you ignored? Your brain has a bandwidth problem. Cognitive scientists have measured it precisely, roughly 120 bits per second of conscious processing power. That's barely enough to follow two conversations simultaneously. Yet you're trying to track dozens of metrics, hundreds of emails, thousands of data points. The math doesn't work. Something has to give. Most people respond to information overload by trying to process faster. They speed read, they multitask. They build bigger dashboards with more widgets. This is like trying to solve a traffic jam by driving faster. It makes everything worse while creating the illusion of progress. The masters take the opposite approach. They don't try to process more information faster. They ruthlessly eliminate information that doesn't directly impact their ability to make better decisions. They treat attention like the scarce resource it is and guard it more jealously than money. But this isn't about becoming less informed. It's about becoming more precisely informed. It's about distinguishing between signal and noise, between metrics that matter and metrics that merely exist. Real signal has three characteristics. It's predictive, it's actionable, and it's linked to outcomes you actually care about. Everything else is noise, no matter how interesting or seemingly important it appears. Predictive means the information tells you something about the future, not just the past. Lagging indicators, like last quarter's revenue, are noise when you're trying to make decisions about next quarter's strategy. Leading indicators like customer engagement trends or pipeline velocity are signal because they help you anticipate what's coming. Actionable means you can actually do something with the information. Knowing that your industry is changing is noise. Knowing specifically which customer segments are most vulnerable to disruption and what you can do to protect or pivot them is signal. Outcome-linked means the metric directly connects to results you're trying to achieve. Vanity metrics like social media followers or website traffic might make you feel good, but unless they correlate with revenue, retention, or other business outcomes, they're just sophisticated distractions. The elimination process requires surgical precision. You can't just cut randomly. You need to identify which information sources are contaminating your decision-making and which are genuinely essential. This means conducting regular audits of your information diet. Start with the delete or double test. For every metric you currently track, every report you regularly read, every notification you receive, ask yourself, does this information make me more likely to make better decisions? If the answer is no, delete it. If the answer is yes, ask the follow-up, should I be getting twice as much of this information? If not, you've found your optimal level. Most people fail this test spectacularly. They discover they're tracking dozens of metrics that have no impact on their decision-making. They're reading reports that contain no actionable insights. They're receiving notifications about events they can't influence. The bandwidth management becomes critical once you've identified your essential signals. You need to create time-boxed windows for information consumption. Instead of checking metrics continuously throughout the day, you batch process them at specific intervals. Instead of responding to every communication immediately, you create designated periods for different types of information intake. This isn't about being less responsive, it's about being more intentionally responsive. When you're constantly switching between different information streams, you never achieve the depth of focus necessary for genuine insight. You become a human pinball, bouncing between data points without ever developing a coherent understanding of what they mean. The single-screen discipline forces even more precision. If you can't fit your essential metrics on one screen, you're tracking too much. This constraint forces you to prioritize ruthlessly and focus on the vital few indicators that actually drive your decisions. But the real power comes from building attention guardrails, systematic barriers that protect your cognitive bandwidth from contamination. This means creating interruption firewall policies that block non-essential communications during focus periods. It means establishing communication protocols that batch similar types of information together rather than scattering them throughout your day. The continuous refinement process ensures your signal-to-noise ratio keeps improving over time. Every week, you review your information diet and eliminate anything that didn't contribute to better decision-making. You sunset metrics that have outlived their usefulness. You unsubscribe from reports that no longer provide value. You constantly tune your information intake to maintain maximum clarity. This isn't a one-time optimization, it's an ongoing discipline. Information environments change, business priorities shift. What was signal yesterday might be noise today. The only way to maintain clean signals is through relentless curation. Master this discipline, and you'll develop an almost supernatural ability to see what matters while ignoring what doesn't. You'll make decisions based on clarity rather than confusion. You'll act on insight rather than impulse. But even the cleanest signals mean nothing if you can't translate them into action fast enough to matter. That's where the next breakthrough becomes essential. A scoring system that turns complex trade-offs into simple mathematics, letting you rank any set of options in minutes rather than days. Chapter 7, Rapid Score. You have too many good ideas. That's your problem. Not a lack of options, but an abundance of them. Every day brings new opportunities, new projects, new possibilities. Your backlog grows faster than your capacity. Your team debates endlessly about priorities. Your resources get scattered across dozens of initiatives, each one seemingly important, none getting the focus they need to succeed. While you're paralyzed by choice, your competitors are moving. They're not smarter than you. They don't have better ideas. They just have a way to cut through the complexity and identify the few actions that will drive the most results. What if you could rank any set of options in minutes instead of meetings? What if you could turn gut feelings into mathematical precision? What if you could surface the vital 10% of actions that produce 90% of your results? There's a deceptively simple scoring system that transforms decision-making from art to science. It's been battle-tested by product teams who shipped 40% more features without working extra hours. It's the difference between busy work and breakthrough work. But here's what most people get wrong. They think scoring systems are about perfect accuracy. They're not. They're about consistent prioritization. They're about creating a shared language for trade-offs. They're about moving from endless debate to decisive action. The framework itself seems almost too simple to work. 4 letters that represent 4 dimensions of every decision you'll ever make. But simplicity is the point. Complexity kills speed. Nuance paralyzes action. You need a system that's sophisticated enough to capture what matters, but simple enough to use under pressure. The first dimension is about magnitude. How much difference will this actually make? Not how much you hope it will make, or how much it could theoretically make, but how much it will realistically move the needle on outcomes you care about. This isn't about dreaming big, it's about estimating honestly. Most people overestimate impact because they fall in love with their ideas. They see the best-case scenario and mistake it for the likely scenario. The scoring discipline forces you to calibrate your expectations against reality. What's the actual size of the problem you're solving? How many people will this affect? How much will it change their behavior or outcomes? The second dimension is about certainty. How confident are you that this will actually work? This is where most prioritization frameworks fail. They assume all options are equally likely to succeed. In reality, some initiatives are slam dunks, while others are moonshots. Some are proven approaches in new contexts, while others are experimental bets with unknown odds. Confidence scoring forces you to weight your estimates by probability. A high-impact initiative that has a 10% chance of working might be less valuable than a medium-impact initiative that has a 90% chance of working. This isn't about being conservative, it's about being realistic about uncertainty. The third dimension is about cost. How much will this actually require? Not just money, but time, attention, political capital, opportunity cost. Everything has a price. The question is whether you're honest about what that price is before you commit to paying it. Most people underestimate effort because they focus on the fun parts and ignore the tedious ones. They think about building the feature, but forget about testing it, documenting it, supporting it, maintaining it. They consider the direct costs, but miss the indirect ones. The scoring discipline forces you to account for the full price of your choices. The fourth dimension adds a multiplier effect. How many people will this touch? A small improvement that affects everyone might be more valuable than a large improvement that affects a few. A feature that reaches millions of users might justify more investment than one that serves thousands, even if the individual impact is smaller. But reach isn't just about numbers, it's about leverage. Some initiatives create network effects that amplify their impact over time. Others unlock new capabilities that enable future innovations. The best opportunities often combine direct impact with strategic positioning. The magic happens when you multiply these dimensions together. Suddenly, your gut feelings become quantified. Your debates become data-driven. Your priorities become clear. Options that seemed equally important reveal themselves as obviously superior or inferior. But the scoring is just the beginning. The real power comes from the ranking that emerges. When you plot your options on a grid, patterns become visible that were hidden in the complexity. You see clusters of high-value, low-effort wins that should be executed immediately. You identify high-impact, high-effort bets that deserve dedicated resources. You spot low-impact initiatives that should be killed regardless of how easy they seem. This isn't about mathematical precision. It's about relative prioritization. You're not trying to predict the future with perfect accuracy. You're trying to make better bets with the information you have. You're creating a systematic way to separate the vital few from the trivial many. The cut-line discipline forces the hardest decisions. You can't do everything. You can't even do most things. You need to draw a line between what gets resources and what gets killed. The scoring system makes this line visible and defensible. Instead of political arguments about pet projects, you have objective criteria for resource allocation. Teams that master this approach report a fundamental shift in their culture. They spend less time debating and more time executing. They kill bad ideas faster and double down on good ones sooner. They ship more value with the same resources because they're not wasting effort on low-impact initiatives. But even the most sophisticated scoring system can lead you astray if you're optimizing for the wrong outcomes or building on the wrong assumptions. That's where the next level of thinking becomes critical. A method that strips away everything you think you know and rebuilds your understanding from the ground up, revealing solutions that conventional wisdom would never discover. Chapter 8, First Principles. Everything you know is borrowed. Every strategy you use, every approach you follow, every best practice you implement, it's all inherited wisdom from someone else's experience in someone else's context. You're operating on assumptions you've never questioned, following rules you didn't create, solving problems the way they've always been solved. And that's exactly why you're stuck. While you're optimizing existing solutions, someone else is rebuilding the problem from scratch. While you're following industry conventions, they're discovering that those conventions are arbitrary. While you're improving incrementally, they're leaping ahead exponentially. What if the biggest breakthroughs came not from doing things better, but from questioning why things are done that way at all? What if the path to innovation ran through destruction, tearing down everything you think you know and rebuilding it from the ground up? This isn't about being contrarian for the sake of it. It's about thinking like a physicist in a world of historians. It's about stripping problems down to their fundamental components and reassembling them without the baggage of conventional wisdom. Most people approach problems like archaeologists. They dig through layers of accumulated knowledge, accepted practices, and inherited assumptions. They ask, how has this been done before, and what do the experts recommend? They optimize within existing frameworks rather than questioning the frameworks themselves. First principles thinkers approach problems like chemists. They break everything down to its basic elements and ask, what are the fundamental truths here? They ignore how things have been done and focus on how they could be done. They start with physics and work their way up to strategy. The difference is profound. When you reason from analogy, you're constrained by the limitations of existing solutions. When you reason from first principles, you're only constrained by the laws of nature. One approach leads to incremental improvement. The other leads to revolutionary breakthroughs. But here's what makes this so difficult. Your brain is wired to use analogies. It's efficient. It's fast. It conserves mental energy. When you see a new problem, your mind immediately searches for similar problems you've solved before. This pattern matching served our ancestors well when most problems were variations on survival themes. In a rapidly changing world, it can trap you in obsolete thinking. The deconstruction process requires a different kind of discipline. You need to identify and challenge every assumption embedded in how you currently think about the problem. You need to strip away the accumulated layers of conventional wisdom and get down to the irreducible core. Start by asking the most dangerous question in business: why? Not once, but repeatedly. Why do we do it this way? Why is that necessary? Why has no one tried a different approach? Keep drilling down until you hit bedrock, the fundamental constraints that can't be questioned because they're rooted in physics, mathematics, or human nature. Everything else is fair game for elimination. This process reveals something shocking. Most of what we consider necessary is actually arbitrary. Most constraints are self-imposed. Most limitations exist only because no one has bothered to challenge them. The rules of the game aren't laws of nature. They're just rules someone made up. But deconstruction is only half the battle. The real power comes from reassembly, building new solutions from the ground up using only the fundamental truths you've identified. This is where zero-based thinking becomes your weapon. Instead of asking, how can we improve our current approach, you ask, if we were starting from scratch today, knowing what we know now, how would we solve this problem? This shift in perspective is liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it frees you from the constraints of existing solutions. Terrifying because it forces you to take responsibility for creating something entirely new. There's no template to follow, no best practices to copy, no experts to consult. You're on your own with just the fundamental truths and your ability to reason from them. The reassembly process requires constraint-stretch thinking. You take each fundamental constraint you've identified and ask, what if this weren't true? Or what if this could be changed? Most constraints that seem absolute are actually just expensive to overcome. Most limitations that appear permanent are just difficult to transcend. This is where breakthrough innovations emerge. Someone realizes that a constraint everyone accepts as given is actually just a design choice. Someone discovers that a trade-off everyone considers inevitable is actually just a failure of imagination. Someone finds a way to sidestep a limitation that trapped everyone else. But first principles thinking isn't just about big breakthroughs. It's about building a systematic approach to innovation. You create micro-tests to validate your new understanding. You build proof-of-concept experiments to test whether your reassembled solutions actually work. You establish build, measure, learn loops that let you iterate rapidly without committing massive resources to unproven ideas. The cultural shift this requires is profound. You need to create an environment where questioning assumptions is rewarded, not punished, where because we've always done it this way becomes a banned phrase, where intellectual curiosity is valued more than operational efficiency. This means celebrating the people who ask uncomfortable questions, rewarding the teams that challenge conventional wisdom, creating safe spaces for experimentation and failure, building systems that capture and amplify insights from first principles thinking. Most organizations resist this shift because it's destabilizing. It threatens existing power structures. It makes current expertise less valuable. It creates uncertainty where there was once confidence. But the organizations that embrace it gain an almost unfair advantage. They see opportunities that others miss and solve problems that others consider unsolvable. Master first principles thinking, and you'll develop the ability to see through the illusions that trap everyone else. You'll find elegant solutions to complex problems. You'll create value in ways that competitors can't copy because they don't understand the underlying logic. But even the most innovative thinking means nothing if you can't focus your efforts on the activities that actually drive results. That's where the final principle becomes essential, a mathematical law that reveals why most of your efforts are wasted and how to redirect them toward maximum impact. Chapter 9, 80-20 Edge. You're working on the wrong things. Right now, as you read this, you're probably investing equal energy across dozens of activities, treating each task as if it carries equal weight, spreading your attention like peanut butter across an endless to-do list. You're optimizing for busy instead of optimizing for impact. Meanwhile, there's a mathematical law hiding in plain sight that could transform everything. It's been validated across industries, cultures, and centuries. It reveals that most of your efforts are essentially worthless and shows you exactly where to focus instead. This isn't about working harder. It's about working on the right things. It's about discovering that the universe has a bias toward inequality and learning to exploit that bias for everything it's worth. The pattern is everywhere once you know how to see it. 20% of your customers generate 80% of your revenue. 20% of your features drive 80% of user engagement. 20% of your team creates 80% of the value. 20% of your decisions determine 80% of your outcomes. This isn't coincidence. It's not industry-specific. It's not cultural. It's a fundamental property of complex systems, a mathematical reality that most people ignore to their own detriment. The distribution of outcomes in almost every domain follows what mathematicians call a power law. A few inputs generate most of the results. A small number of causes create the majority of effects. The vital few dominate the trivial many. But here's what separates winners from everyone else. Winners don't just acknowledge this pattern, they ruthlessly exploit it. They hunt for the vital few with the intensity of a predator. They identify the high-leverage activities and hammer them relentlessly. They starve the low-impact tasks of resources and attention. Most people do the opposite. They treat all activities as equally important. They give equal time to high-impact and low-impact tasks. They optimize for completion rather than contribution. They mistake motion for progress and busyness for productivity. The first step is outcome mapping, identifying what actually drives the results you care about. This isn't about listing everything you do. It's about measuring everything you do and discovering which activities actually move the needle. Start with your key value metrics. What outcomes are you ultimately trying to achieve? Revenue growth, customer retention, market share, product adoption? Whatever it is, you need to trace backward from those outcomes to the activities that influence them. Then comes the data slicing. the systematic analysis that reveals your heavy hitters. Look at your customer base and rank them by revenue contribution. Examine your product features and rank them by usage and impact. Analyze your marketing channels and rank them by conversion and cost effectiveness. Study your team members and rank them by value creation. What you'll discover will shock you. The distribution won't be even. It won't even be close. A small fraction of your inputs will be responsible for the vast majority of your outputs. The 80-20 rule might actually be 90-10 or even 95-5 in your specific situation. This revelation creates a moment of choice. You can continue spreading your resources evenly across all activities, or you can radically reallocate them toward the vital few. You can keep treating all customers equally, or you can obsess over the ones who actually drive your business. You can maintain all features equally, or you can double down on the ones that create real value. The reallocation process requires courage because it means saying no to things that seem important. It means killing projects that people care about. It means disappointing stakeholders who want equal attention for their priorities. It means accepting that most of what you're currently doing isn't worth doing. But the payoff is extraordinary. When you concentrate your resources on high-leverage activities, you don't just improve incrementally, you improve exponentially. You create momentum that compounds. You build flywheels that generate increasing returns. The key is designing these flywheels around your vital few. Instead of trying to optimize everything, you optimize the activities that actually matter. Instead of improving all processes equally, you perfect the processes that drive results. Instead of developing all capabilities simultaneously, you become world-class at the capabilities that create competitive advantage. But here's the trap that catches most people. They identify their 80-20 once and assume it stays constant. They find their vital few and stop looking. They optimize their high-leverage activities and forget to monitor whether those activities remain high-leverage. The distribution shifts, markets change, customer preferences evolve. What was vital yesterday might be trivial today. What was low impact last year might be high impact now. You need continuous vigilance to ensure you're still focusing on what actually matters. This requires periodic full-funnel scans, systematic reviews of your entire operation to identify new patterns and emerging opportunities. You need to regularly re-rank your customers, reevaluate your features, reassess your channels, and re-examine your activities. You also need contingency plans for the segments you're ignoring. Just because something is in the 80% doesn't mean it's worthless. It just means it's not worth your primary focus. But you still need systems to monitor these areas for changes that might elevate their importance. The ultimate goal isn't just efficiency, it's leverage. You want to reach a point where small inputs generate massive outputs, where minor adjustments create major improvements, where focused effort produces outsized results. This is how individuals outperform teams, how startups beat corporations, how focused companies dominate diversified ones. They've discovered their vital few and organized everything around exploiting them. Master this principle, and you'll develop an almost supernatural ability to see through complexity to what actually matters. You'll stop wasting time on activities that feel important but don't drive results. You'll concentrate your energy on the few things that create disproportionate value. But here's the deepest insight, the one that ties together everything you've learned in this book. The 80-20 principle applies to decision-making itself. 20% of your decisions will determine 80% of your outcomes. A few critical choices will shape your entire trajectory. The 9 frameworks you've mastered, from dual systems to pattern power, from OODA loops to frugal trees, from bias armor to clean signals, from rapid scoring to first principles, these aren't just tools for making better decisions. They're your vital few, the high-leverage capabilities that will compound over time. Most people will read about these frameworks and do nothing. Some will try 1 or 2 and give up when they don't see immediate results. A few will implement them systematically and transform their decision-making forever. The choice is yours. You can continue making decisions the way you always have, slowly, inconsistently, with mixed results. Or you can master these frameworks and join the elite few who make smart decisions fast, consistently, under pressure. The world rewards those who can cut through complexity and act with clarity. It punishes those who hesitate, overthink, and second-guess themselves into irrelevance. You now have the tools to win every choice. The question is, will you use them? Your next decision starts now.